In 1990, a mushroom hunter finds the burned skeletal remains of a woman in rural Arkansas. Due to the brutal treatment of these remains by her killer, she will become known as Bone Woman, and less often as Benton County Jane Doe. In 2022, Benton County authorities make a major announcement. Using investigative genetic genealogy, they were able to identify 3 unidentified individuals who had been murdered in their county, including Benton County Jane Doe. Her name is Donna Nelton, and her story is haunting. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Devyn Dalton.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
I confess, this episode we're about to do has stressed me out so much. So much.
Maybe you shouldn't be telling me that. Because now I'm going to be stressed out.
There is so much crime in this episode.
Any of it just like petty crime?
No. It's like layers of crime. All the crimes. All the crimes in one place.
All the bad crime?
Bad crime? Like mediocre crime? Major crimes? I don't know. We cover the full range here.
Okay.
Also, the other thing that was stressing me out is that I work so hard not to emphasize the perpetrator here.
Yeah.
But this one, like, he ends up taking up, like, a good chunk of the real estate in this episode because we're not going to find out a lot about his victim, and that makes me sad. So I'm going to try as best as possible.
So we're talking about him today?
He gets in here, but the most logical way to tell this story is to start with him, but I don't want to start with him, so...
So are we going not logically?
We're going not logically.
Okay.
And our listeners will just come with us in this very crime-filled episode about a woman who was unidentified, who is now identified.
Okay.
But we're going back to a time when I first knew her, which was when she was known as Bone Woman.
So, like, we've had other people named by just having bones before, but usually it's like something a little better than Bone Woman.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate name. So the title of my poem at the end is Bone Woman because it comes from that kind of very shocking name.
Okay.
Otherwise, she is known as Benton County Jane Doe. So
Okay.
I'll refer to her as that during the episode until we get to the part where they identify her.
So, yeah, Benton County Jane Doe. Okay. Let's go with that. Because I think it's a little... Like, even Bone Jane Doe would have been better than just Bone Woman.
Yeah. So, what I knew of this story, it begins just south of Maysville, Arkansas. This is kind of, to get everyone sort of situated, wedged into the corner of Arkansas near the Oklahoma and Missouri state lines. And so, this is the afternoon of Monday, May 7th, 1990, when a mushroom hunter... Yes.
We have a mushroom hunter.
There's a mushroom hunter.
So it's not a good boy or a good girl this time.
No.
It's not a hunter.
No.
It's not a side of the road garbage picker. It is the second most likely group to find a body. A mushroom hunter. Or forager, whatever you guys prefer to be called.
Right. In the articles, they said mushroom hunter.
Hunter.
Yes.
If anyone knows the proper way to say that, hunter, forager, gatherer,
searcher,
let us know because I think this is going to come up a lot in our future.
I feel like at this point, I'm concerned about your love of mushroom hunting.
I guess I'm fascinated by the way things get discovered.
Okay. So,
and I feel like if you're a mushroom gatherer or hunter, you need to like go out there knowing that this might happen to you.
I feel like maybe you should take some classes, is what I'm saying.
In mushroom gathering?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Okay. Sorry. You can keep going.
In this case, this unnamed mushroom hunter gatherer is in a heavily wooded area off of Arkansas Highway 112, close to the intersection of Highway 43. He's driving a four-wheel drive vehicle, and he plans on hiding it in the brush while he's looking for mushrooms, which is, like, weird to me, but that's what he was doing. And that's when he comes across some bones on the ground. Now, he doesn't report what he saw immediately.
Are you kidding?
Well, mostly in this case, he's not quite certain what he's seeing. Like, they're bones, but he's not.
They could be animal.
They could be animal. He doesn't know. It's a shocking. But what he does is he goes home and consults a science book.
Oh, okay.
See what the difference between human and animal bones are.
I don't blame him. I think I'd be kind of that guy that's like, you don't want to call the police and then have them come over and be like, it's a deer.
Right. I mean, I feel like now you could, I'm willing to bet you could like take a photo and like Google image search and it would let you know. But back then it was like a science book.
Yeah.
Yeah. By that evening, he finally decides it would be best to call the Benton County Sheriff's Office. That's the county that they're in. When the sheriff's officers arrive on the scene, it's very clear that a crime has taken place. The bones the mushroom hunter had found were about 20 to 30 yards off of a dirt road and along a rutted trail. These remains, which were, it seems, just bone, were described as being neatly raked into a pile beneath a large elm tree.
Have you ever come across another case where something was neatly raked before?
No.
Okay,
It seems
this
like
doesn't seem typical to me, but I didn't know if this was just because I'm not way into true crime.
no, it seems like a lot was done to these remains after. So in this case, when they come across them, they are described as being neatly raked. This elm tree, as well as the bones, were described as being charred. In fact, the elm tree had burn marks up the east side of its trunk about 3.5 feet up. Now, when it comes to crimes like this, there are a few questions, namely, who is the victim, what caused their death, and then, of course, who did this to them. As far as identification, there was no ID with the victim. In fact, due to the condition of the remains, they weren't clear in those first few moments what the sex of the victim was, but they did have one clue, which was it appeared there were some women's undergarments burned at the scene. When interviewed a few days later, the county coroner, Tommy Norwood, said that only about 65% of the individual's bones were recovered. Part of that 65% was a femur, and Norwood said that based on this, the individual was between 5'10" and 6 foot.
That's tall.
That is very tall. So again, this estimation is being based off of the femur. Other than the underwear and those initial height estimations, though, there didn't seem to be much information available immediately about who this person was.
It seems weird that everything was done so neatly and everything else was burned, but the underwear wasn't.
No, the underwear is like crispy charty too, I think.
It just wasn't like well.
Yeah, it's identifiable
stuff.
as
Okay.
Yeah, as women's underwear. There was, of course, the question of the cause of death. It was clear from the start that this was criminal in nature, of course. And indeed, during their search, they found buckshot pellets, as well as what appeared to be shotgun wadding beneath the individual's skull. In the first article about this, Sheriff Lee said of what they found, they, meaning the killers, put a bonfire on top of the body and burned it. Later reports would say that it seemed that after this, someone may have driven a vehicle over those remains to obscure them even more. In deciding when this crime happened, the coroner said that there didn't seem to be any signs that these remains were disturbed by animals, but he did indicate that they were weathered. And Sheriff Lee added, "We don't feel like it's been here more than a year. When you touch the tree, you still get charcoal. We are finding some things that lead us to believe that the person was dead before the body was burned." With so few answers, the individual's remains, as well as some of the tree's bark, are sent off to the Arkansas State Crime Lab. It will be determined from there that this was likely a white woman between the ages of 25 and 35 years old, who was 5'5"-ish, not the 5'10" to 6 foot as the coroner had originally said.
Okay.
Later, a man will come forward to say that he saw a fire in the area in February, but assumed it was someone burning trash. This potential lead helped them determine that she was likely left in the area in 1990. In these initial days, few other leads are developed. Over the years, though, several theories and leads are followed in identifying this woman. First, she gets what I call her Doe name. She was sometimes referred to as Benton County Jane Doe, and again, more often than not, people are calling her Bone Woman due to the fragmentation and state of her remains. We're, again, sticking with Benton County Jane Doe. Yeah. Now, there has long been talk of a serial killer in this area of the United States. And interestingly, there was a 1991 article from the Springfield News Leader that came up when searching information on this woman. This is somewhat of an aside, really, but it caught my attention. In this article, they cite 4 cases in the corner of Missouri and Arkansas. The 1987 disappearance and murder of Deborah Sue Lewis, who was 31 and kidnapped from her car near Springfield, Missouri. The 1989 disappearance and murder of Kelly Ann Workman, 24, who disappeared while mowing a church cemetery lot in Douglas County, Missouri. The 1989 disappearance and murder of Dana Stidham, 18, from Bella Vista, Arkansas, who was last seen leaving a supermarket parking lot. And the 1990 killing of an unidentified woman in McDonald County, Missouri, who we now know as Shauna Harvey, also known as Shauna Garber.
Okay, so this isn't the same killer, so it's just this area has like a lot of murder. Like we did do the episode on Shauna Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just
So I think
like coincidence that there's different murders going on in the same area?
So I think at the time they were floating this theory that maybe all of these are connected somehow, right? They don't end up being, although 3 of them are still unsolved.
So we don't even know if all of these were killed by the same person either?
Unlikely.
As each other?
Now, in retrospect, unlikely.
How many killers were there?
Yeah, I think it's just a murdery. It's very
So we're
murdery.
looking at more than 2 murderers.
Yeah.
Total for this area. Okay.
Yeah. But I think at the time they were theorizing that there was a serial killer that was involved in all these cases.
Because it's easier to think of than... Like, it's almost easier to believe one guy doing all this horrible stuff than, like, multiple people doing horrible things.
Right, maybe. But we now know, for instance, who murdered Shauna Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
Of the other women that I mentioned, only Kelly Ann, that one's in progress, right?
Okay.
And so what I thought was interesting about this is that I didn't realize how close the site where Shauna Harvey was murdered is to the site where Benton County Jane Doe, like how close those are to one another. They're about just 20 miles away from each other, and they were found just a few months apart. So it's really interesting to me that this Jane Doe wasn't included in the article, even though the reporters said they interviewed hundreds of sheriffs and police officers about their unsolved crimes and about how there wasn't enough collaboration between investigative agencies to solve murders and unidentified persons. So, like, why wasn't she included in this?
Right, and they're 20 miles apart the same year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, besides, like, this initial claim that's made that they're going to be searching a nearby lake for information about Benton County Jane Doe, and besides her body, her remains being sent to the crime lab, there's not much reporting about her case in the coming months or years. Over the years, Benton County Jane Doe does get included, though, in a list of potential victims of an unsubstantiated serial killer in a series of murders that is sometimes called the Redhead murders, which are unsolved murders which happened between the 1970s and 1990s. So, yeah, it's again lumping her in with serial killers.
And we kind of talked about the Redhead murders in a different episode, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We talked about them when we talked about the case of Marcia King, who was known as Buckskin Girl.
So do they think that our Benton County Jane Doe had red hair also?
They had no idea.
They had no idea.
Yes.
So they were just kind of like
floating this as a possibility. Now, very often, this unsubstantiated, again, killer gets called the Bible Belt killer because these are happening in what's known as the Bible Belt of the United States. So nothing ever comes of this inquiry, but it's also interesting because Benton County Jane Doe is still included on all of these like lists that you see places for the Redhead killer or the Bible Belt killer.
And we know it's not either of those people at this point. And so she's still there?
Yeah, it's weird to me. So I don't know why they still include her on this
We need
list.
to update that.
Anyway, in 1995, there was seemingly a lot of movement in her case. In late 1994 to early 1995, I'm guessing, there was some conversation happening about doing some sort of reconstruction for Benton County Jane Doe to aid in identifying her. By January 6, 1995, though, they make an announcement and determine that due to the extensive damage done to her skull, this was not a possibility. In February 1995, more evidence was sent to the Arkansas Crime Lab to help with identification. They didn't say what this additional evidence was, but they seemed to be following some leads about a possible identification for her. The Benton County Sheriff's Office even went back to the site where Benton County Jane Doe was found and located more bones that were described as being stacked beside the tree.
Separately from where the others were raked into a pile?
Yeah, it's weird. It just gets mentioned briefly, but like...
Why did we not notice that the first time?
Right. Why were there more? Why were they stacked? I don't know. But along with this, they found a chin bone with one full tooth about 4 to 6 inches deep in the ground. Since we know only 65% of her skeletal remains were found previously, all of this is important in gathering more information about her. This also led them to state that they had a tentative ID for her and they were 90% confident in their determination.
How did they get the ID? Just from the tooth?
Yeah, so at this point, it seems to be circumstantial because what they do next is in March, they make an announcement that based on the dental records and the chin bone comparison, this was not the woman they were considering.
Okay.
That woman they announced in this was 24-year-old Joan Butler, who had been abducted and murdered in 1989. And she was from Overland Park, Kansas, and her body had not been recovered. She's actually one of 3 women who are abducted and murdered by the same man. The other 2 are Christine Rusch and Teresa Brown.
So is Joan still missing now?
Yes, actually all 3 women are still missing. This was a case that was tried without having located their bodies, and authorities are still looking for their remains.
So we know that all 3 were killed by the same person, but we haven't recovered any of their bodies.
No.
Are we going to cover their story in the future?
We could.
Would we cover them separately or together? Like, how would you do that?
Yeah, so I got a little curious about their case just because I was like, I've not heard of Joan Butler and I wanted to know a little bit more about her. It would make the most sense if we did do an episode to do like a 1 episode because they happened in really quick succession from one another. And actually 2 of them were roommates.
So it would make sense to keep them together.
Yeah. But I mean, we've asked this before, but if anyone is interested in us covering Joan, Teresa, and Christine, you can send us a message at info@shegoesbyjanepodcast.com or, message us on our socials. But back to Benton County Jane Doe. In late 1995, the Benton County Sheriff's Office was able to send the Arkansas Crime Lab more of what is described as material. And that's in December. None of that yields much in terms of identifying her at this point. In 2008, though, the landscape for missing and unidentified persons is changing, particularly with DNA and the development of the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Systems database, which is why her remains were sent to the University of North Texas to see if they could create a DNA profile for her. They were successful in getting mitochondrial DNA results, and this was added to a NamUs profile for her in December 2008.
Is this one of the earliest DNA identifications we've talked about?
So what they're doing at this point is getting DNA so that they can do a 1-to-1 comparison. So that if someone comes up like a relative or someone who, they're going to compare her to another known sample,
okay,
they'll be able to do that.
Okay, but as far as because most of the DNA solves that we've been talking about are much more recent.
Yes. So they're collecting this DNA in the hopes that they're going to find.
So it's just a little more random.
Yeah, this is much more rudimentary
okay,
compared to what we can do now. Although, I'm sure there's people cringing at me calling it rudimentary. It's it's cool.
Because then it would have been super advanced.
Yeah.
Too.
Yes. In 2008, that was pretty cutting edge.
Right.
In 2016, her case is handed over to Lieutenant Hunter Petray, who was set to do a review of her case to see what the next best steps would be. He emphasized identifying her was critical to solving who murdered her. He said, when you don't have the identity of the victim, it's hard to establish a timeline of where did this person come from, who did they associate with. To further this goal, he said her dental records were compared to numerous missing women, but without luck. This case, like many of the cases we talk about, seems impossible to solve until suddenly investigative genetic genealogy arrives on the scene.
Okay, that's what I was waiting for. Yeah, so they did not solve it in 2008 with this.
No.
That was just a starting point.
It was a good first attempt.
So we're solving it Well, I'll let you finish. Continue.
Okay.
Okay.
In March 2021, Lieutenant Petray and Captain Thomas C. meet with Othram Inc., a company that does investigative genetic genealogy. They handed over to them 3 cases of unidentified individuals in Benton County. Benton County Jane Doe, of course. The next was Lake Man, who was found floating in a sleeping bag in Beaver Lake in 1996. The third was John Doe, who was found in the woods near Garfield in 1981. He'd been shot to death. The cost of these 3 cases was $15,758. I've always been curious about how much the overall cost ends up being. And it was paid by the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. On October 25th, 2022, a press conference was held to announce the identification of all 3 individuals. Lake Man was 31-year-old John Douglas Rollins Jr., who had been missing since 1995. John Doe was Fred James, or Jamie Grow, who was from Colorado, but was missing out of Fayetteville. He was last seen offering a ride to 2 women. And the third, Benton County Jane Doe, also known as Bone Woman, was 28-year-old Donna Nelton. She had finally been given her name back.
So that's interesting with because we're always covering cases of women being killed primarily by men.
Mm-hmm.
Was Fred James Grow killed by the 2 women he gave the ride to? Do we know that?
We don't. So they were actually 2 women from local culty commune type places. Their names have not been released at the time of this episode because I think they are under consideration for something.
That's kind of interesting to me,
Or at least are witness to or know something. So they've not been named.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment.
Okay, so are you going to tell us a little bit more about Donna?
I'm going to try. So relatively little information is available about who Donna was or what she did in her life. We do know she was originally from Arkansas, and the team from Othram was first able to find a distant relative of hers during their research. This individual did not know of any missing family members, but they did provide investigators with information about their family. This led them to a close family member who confirmed that Donna had been missing since 1989. The relative underwent a DNA test that confirmed the remains were Donna's. Of the 3 unidentified persons who publicly got their names back during this October press conference, Donna's case is the only one whose case is considered closed. In 1990, in prison for other charges, her partner, or possibly husband, he sometimes referred to her as his wife, confessed to killing a woman named Donna. He claimed he buried her body on his farm in Missouri, but now we know he left her body in Arkansas. Donna's relatives were able to confirm that Donna and her partner, who we're going to call G, would pass through Benton County on the way to the Pine Island RV Park in Jay, Oklahoma. In fact, it was later revealed that a flyer for this park was found near her remains. G died in prison in 2008, which means he'll never face charges in her murder.
Did he ever say what happened to Donna, though?
Yeah, well, this is the part that goes against how I want to tell these stories, because basically to understand what happened to Donna, you have to understand what kind of man G was, and that does highlight him in a way that I can't for her. G was from Branson, Missouri, and kind of the first time I came across much mention of him is in 1971 when he was 28, and he'd broken into the Second Baptist Church in Springfield, Missouri with an accomplice. He was captured and charged with the break-in and theft of $59.64.
What was he hoping to accomplish?
This man, I think never met a crime that he wasn't interested in committing, right? And this seems really minor on the grand scheme of things, like this $59.64, but he had one major problem, and that's that he was on parole from a federal bank robbery conviction for a bank robbery he'd committed in Arkansas. So back to federal prison he goes.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it might make more sense as we're going
Just doesn't seem
here.
like if you're already in trouble, why $59?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he doesn't stay in federal prison long, because in 1973, he's arrested again. This time, he's committed a robbery in which he robbed a doctor's home, and during the course of it, tied up the doctor's wife, their maid, and some others in the house. During the investigation into this, investigators recovered jewelry and discovered some weapons, including a sawed-off shotgun and a pistol with a silencer. In December of 1974, he pled not guilty to 2 violations of federal gun laws, which included concealing and storing 2 partially full cases of dynamite and having an unregistered silencer. So I'm guessing at some point in there, they also discovered the dynamite.
The dynamite. Okay.
Yeah. Just like not something I've thought of people casually having.
They're just 2 partially full cases.
Right. And by 1975, he was sentenced to 10 years for 2 different charges, the unregistered firearm and the storing of stolen explosives. So apparently he stole explosives. He was sent to federal prison in Leavenworth, where he met a guy named S. S, to be clear, isn't involved in Donna's death, but I really don't feel like emphasizing his name today.
Is he not a great guy either?
No. So because G and S get out of federal prison in November in 1978, so for keeping track, that's about 3 years worth of what was served of G's sentence. And basically these 2 go to Utah, where they go on what I'm going to call a Christmas weekend rampage. During this, they commit a robbery where they hold a family hostage, and this is followed by 2 other robberies where they also hold 2 more families hostage. During one of these, the 2 are cornered in Davis County, Utah, and surrounded by members of the sheriff's office and the Utah Highway Patrol.
So these guys are just, like, they think they're in the Wild West.
Pretty much, because a gun battle ensues.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And the deputy sheriff and a Utah highway patrolman are wounded during this. And at some point, and I'm really not sure what point of this rampage, a helicopter is shot down.
I feel like you're just making up stuff now.
This is like so wild. Like I was just like, I am so stressed. It's so chaotic.
It's so chaotic.
So on December 24th, S is captured, but G, cockroach that he is, gets away on foot and makes his way back to Kansas City. And this is where we're going to get into a little bit of a mystery that I would love more information on. So if you have details, please message us. It falls outside of our focus on missing and unidentified women, but I'm still curious if there's anything we can do to highlight this next part of the story more.
Well, now I'm curious. We just went into like a movie.
Yes. Don't worry, there's more shootouts to come.
Oh, shoot him up.
Yeah, so once he's in Kansas City, G connects with a man that he knows from federal prison named Michael Walker. Michael is a 39-year-old man who is living with his 20-year-old girlfriend, Lisa Holmes. Michael was a counterfeiter who had been addicted to heroin but was trying to quit and was using methadone provided by a clinic. To support himself and Lisa, it's believed that Michael was boosting goods and working as what's called a professional shoplifter.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, so instead of like shoplifting for like personal goods, right, he specifically was shoplifting with the intent to sell. For her part, Lisa was, well, unemployed.
Okay.
She was from Charleston, South Carolina, from a relatively wealthy family, and during her 18 months in Kansas City, it seems like she only briefly worked as a sales clerk at a retail store. Otherwise, her parents and her siblings supported her by sending her cash. They helped her pay for her $400 a month apartment, which the newspapers made a really big deal about. That's about $1,800 today. And her $450 a month payment on her 1978 Lincoln Continental.
And she's 20. And she's with this 39-year-old
Yes.
professional shoplifter.
Yes.
Okay.
Her mother would later say that Lisa had a love for the finer things in life, and her family happily supported her in this. Her mother said that she had sent Lisa at least $4,000 to $5,000 in the previous few months.
So she is lucky.
Yes. She's well supported by her family. On February 9th, 1979, though, Lisa's mother asked police to check on Lisa at her apartment. Her mother had received an anonymous phone call that stated something had happened in Lisa's apartment. This was followed up by a second call stating that Lisa was dead. Indeed, when police arrived, it was clear that something had happened. They found a hole in the wall and blood on the garage floor that matched both Lisa and Michael's blood type. Michael's body was found on February 27th inside his car, which was parked at an apartment complex 6 miles from where he lived with Lisa. His jaw had been broken and he'd been shot in the head. His body was wrapped in a yellow blanket and wedged between his back and front seats. Lisa was found on March 10th in a creek near Blue Springs, Missouri. She was also wrapped in a blanket. and her hands were tied behind her back. Her cause of death was listed as strangulation. Now, there's a lot of weirdness with this case, including that Michael's sister was found driving Lisa's car, and when asked about it, she claimed a woman she didn't know handed her the keys and told her that Lisa wanted her to drive the car.
That is strange.
Isn't that bizarre?
That is really bizarre.
Yeah, this whole case is like strange to me, but one of the main suspects in the couple's murder was, of course, G. He'd already left Kansas City at this point. So, I mean, like, we know in December he was in Utah at the end of December, and then this couple ends up murdered in early February, and he's been living with them.
Yeah.
But he gets added to the FBI's top 10 fugitive list, and I think this is mostly for the Utah rampage that he went on, particularly because officers were shot.
So not because he's a murder suspect, it's because of that.
Yeah, I think it's like...
Well, I mean, people definitely got hurt when he's shooting down helicopters and shooting at officers, so...
Right.
Okay.
So he was put on this list. In December of 1979, though, they locate him living in a trailer near Fort Smith, Arkansas. When he left the trailer in his pickup truck, investigators surrounded him. He'd said previously that he'd never intended to be taken alive again, so it's no wonder he put his truck in reverse when this happened and rammed into an FBI van. An agent shot out his tires, another his window, at which point he got out of his truck and opened fire on the van. During this, an agent shot him, striking G in the leg. Once they went inside his home, they found a notary seal, radios that monitored police frequencies, hundreds of pills, and what was described as an arsenal of weapons. One, which I'm going to call particular attention to, was a rifle with the inscription that read, "I'll give up my gun when they pull my cold, dead fingers from the trigger."
The inscription guy must have had fun with that day.
Right. Like,
okay.
Like maybe they just have like that in stock. I don't know.
Maybe. Is it like a standard?
I don't know. But like, I feel like that kind of just captures this guy, right?
Although we're talking about like this crime that he did in the like 79, but Donna is in 1990. He's still roaming free?
No. So they bring him in.
Okay.
Right? They bring him in. I kind of lose the thread of what happens with Michael and Lisa's murders. I came across like a message board where both of their family members have been kind of asking about it because no one was ever arrested in their murders.
Okay.
And I know like the police wanted to, and the FBI both wanted to question him about the murders, but then the last article I see is about how they couldn't because he was recovering from this like leg wound. But like what happened?
Yeah.
And I don't see Lisa and Michael mentioned again. So maybe there's something missing, which is why I would love if anyone knows, like, what happened?
Like, why didn't he get...
Yeah, like, why does that not come up in conversation again? What other things were going on with that case? Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I do know he was indicted and eventually convicted for assaulting an FBI agent and possessing unregistered firearms in 1980. So again, not the murder.
Not the murder. Murders. Yeah.
Murderers. By 1988, he's back out of prison again. And we know that Donna was last seen in 1989. So he must have met her sometime in there. I'm guessing 1988, not long after he got out.
Now, there's a good age difference with them too, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, he's substantially older. Not long after, the couple decided to purchase a 150-acre farm in Ozark County, Missouri. They've decided to raise pigeons and turkeys and geese and ducks, but nothing, according to their neighbor, that amounted to much of anything.
The neighbor didn't approve of their bird farming?
No, I mean, yeah, because it wasn't anything for like, resale or...
Oh, they weren't selling like...
I don't know, it just...
Birds for meat?
It doesn't seem that way.
Okay.
Yeah, at least not anything substantial. I mean, it's also not necessarily a surprise that this didn't come to much of anything because apparently G and Donna would only come sporadically, sometimes only spending a night in the trailer on the property before leaving again. They didn't form tight bonds in the community because they were largely seen as outsiders, but there were familiar figures riding their motorcycle into town to get groceries. Their neighbor, John Haskin, had helped the couple move in and helped them find laborers to work on fixing up the property. Haskin says that G always paid these laborers in cash, which he seemed to have a lot of. And while Haskin says that G was always a gentleman, he said specifically of Donna that she had a beautiful personality, as friendly could be. And then he added, rather chillingly, "You never think anything was amiss." But something was amiss. During this time that Donna and G were together, he was actually amassing a drug ring back in Kansas City. Specifically, he and his associates were involved in the production and sale of meth, but they also dealt in cocaine and marijuana, and all of these drugs were being run through several of the nearby states.
I feel like at this point he's just sampling different kinds of criminal activity he could be doing.
Yeah, he never met a crime that he wasn't interested in criming, right?
Mm-hmm.
This drug ring that he was running was busted on April 6, 1990, when the abandoned barn in North Kansas City that G had been producing meth in was raided. He had actually been under surveillance for a year, so this guy legit got out of federal prison in 1988, and by April of 1989, he was already being surveilled for a drug enterprise. He was busted the year later. And this was a serious operation. At the time, they said this might have been the biggest bust in the state, with 814 pounds of meth ready for sale at a street value of over $1 million, probably closer to $2 million.
That sounds like a lot of meth. I'm not sure meth serving sizes, but that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, so this is only actually the amount of meth that was on the premises and not what they were capable of producing, nor what had already been sold.
You said at the time it might have been the biggest bust, so there has been bigger?
Well, so I was like, how much, like my Google search are always ridiculous. So it was like, how big of a drug bust happened in like I'm trying to figure it out, and it's like most of the recent articles were like 100 pounds of meth.
Okay, so it's like 800 pounds is like
a substantial
a lot. Okay.
Yeah. And then like sometimes they like put their meth in like kilo measurements, and so I was like, how many kilos? Like it's just a lot of meth.
That's so much.
And please no one look at my Google searches and
see why you're measuring meth.
Right, why am I measuring meth? While awaiting trial, G did speak to another inmate about his crimes, because apparently he also liked to talk about his criminalness. In this conversation, he claims to have killed a woman named Donna and buried her on his farm in Missouri. He says the two got into an argument about his drug dealings and his jewelry thefts. Specifically, this was an argument about a kilo of cocaine, so it's unclear if Donna was aware of the extent of his drug enterprise. She threatened to tell his probation officer, and that's when he shot her with his .38 caliber revolver.
It's funny that he says he buried her when she wasn't found buried.
Yeah, so I was thinking this over, and there's this thing that you can do where it's like, essentially you can tell someone like a bunch of truths, and then you give them like one lie, and then if that like lie appears later, like someone believes that or says that about you later, like you know who.
So he would know that, like, if he hears this rumor that he killed and buried someone, it came from this dude at prison.
I would assume, because,
okay.
I mean, that's just my assumption. Or he could just been talking to talk or misleading. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's interesting because, like, they don't always take jail informants seriously. But in this case, they did. Because they did know that in October, before the bust on the meth lab, agents had seen G and one of his associates dumping garbage bags into a dumpster. And inside they had found personal effects belonging to Donna.
And they weren't suspicious then about any wrongdoing?
I don't know if they were aware of Donna's existence. And also, I feel like they were really hyper-focused on the
serious
drug
amount of meth they just found?
Well, at this point, he'd probably been under surveillance for a couple months, and they were hoping to, like, build a case against him. And I think, like, that was kind of their overwhelming drive. So
they were, he was under surveillance. They didn't notice that he had a girlfriend.
And I don't know. It's so weird.
Recovered, but she's not around.
Clearly, in the progression of this, Donna is not really taken seriously as someone who needs, like, care, support, investigation, etc.
She's just kind of overlooked at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
And she will continue to be, because the primary drive here is not anything for her benefit.
Okay.
So they decide, though, that this informant also was correct because he provided them confirmation via information they already knew that, like, say, G had a stun gun on him when he was arrested, or the location of a storage locker that G had, or that G owned a drug-sniffing dog.
Wait a minute. The criminal owns a drug-sniffing dog?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Did he adopt it specifically because it was a drug sniffer, or did he just happen to adopt, like, a retired drug sniffer?
No. So he specifically went out to get this dog. This dog was a Labrador named Alex.
Oh.
He was trained by a man in Wisconsin, Wauwatosa, no less, which is actually, we covered Nahida Khatib's case from there. Completely unrelated. The dog's trainer said that he was contacted by a man who wanted to purchase a dog for a business associate who owned a factory in Texas and wanted this dog to be able to search for drugs in employees' cars in the factory parking lot. This was all a fabrication because in reality, G ended up being the purchaser of Alex. The intent was to use Alex to locate drugs that other dealers were selling in the area and essentially then steal those drugs from them.
That's a big plan.
It's a very elaborate plan.
It's a very weird, elaborate plan.
Yeah.
Like if there was like a drug episode of Scooby-Doo, this is what would be happening.
Yeah, I was also like, what happened to Alex?
What did happen to Alex?
I'm not sure ultimately what happens to Alex, but I do know, like, basically during the raid and ensuing stuff, like, one of G's associates essentially made off with Alex.
So he didn't get seized by the police and became a police dog?
No.
No happily ever after for Alex?
I don't know what happened to Alex, but I mean, it doesn't sound so great. I mean, they needed Alex for their plan, so that's positive for him.
Yeah.
With all this information that they're gathering, though, putting Alex aside, they are able to find Donna's car, which was in a storage unit, and began their search of the farm in December 1990. They obtained a warrant for the property and began on a Monday, and they brought in cadaver dogs, 24 FBI agents, and basically searched the entirety of the farm. This wasn't easy given the terrain had steep bridges and rocky wooded areas, as well as ponds and creek beds. Brian Carroll, a Kansas City FBI assistant special agent in charge of the search, said, "We're pretty confident the body is here," which I would like to call attention to, like, the way the body.
The body.
Yeah. The search lasted 3 days with agents sleeping overnight camped out on the property because if they had left, it would have voided the warrant. By Wednesday evening, though, they ended their search without finding her. Special Agent Carroll said, "We kind of have an obligation to find her."
Kind of?
Kind of. They did end up searching other properties that G had access to, and they made statements that they planned to search the farm again, but they never found Donna. G was never charged with Donna's murder. Newspaper reporters at the time said in order to do so, they must first find the body. By this point, G was serving consecutive life sentences without parole because he was considered, at this point, a career federal offender. If they had found Donna's body, there was some belief that they would pursue the death penalty.
So the land that they found Donna's body on, though, that wasn't part of his farm.
No. So the farm is in Ozark County, Missouri.
Okay.
And she was found in Maysville, Arkansas, or close to it. But she was on the sort of path that they would take when they regularly went to their RV park in Oklahoma.
Okay. So he says it's his farm, but really, again, that's just probably that like diversion thing.
I mean, that was my assumption. It just feels like, I'm not sure why he fabricated that piece of information. I think he did a lot of work to make sure that Donna's body would not be found or identified. Yeah, it wasn't just that he committed this really brutal murder. It's also he wanted to make sure, like, even, like, no one found her. Her loved ones didn't find her. And, you know, he's just never going to face charges in her death. And her family now does have some answers. But those answers came too late for her mother, though. Lieutenant Hunter Petray said at the press conference announcing Donna's identification that we missed notifying her mother by 1 year. We missed it. Donna's mother was 103 when she passed away.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, Bone Woman, read by Devyn Dalton. Devyn is a Canadian-born actor, dancer, and stunt woman extraordinaire with over 80 stunt credits. A few of Devyn's well-known credits include Rise of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, The BFG, Hypnotic, DC Legends of Tomorrow, Two-Sentence Horror Story, Fairly Odd Christmas, Beyblade Burst, My Little Pony, Peter Pan and Wendy, and The Last of Us. To catch Devyn's latest work, keep your eyes peeled for some upcoming projects. Brothers, playing the role of Samuel, Grand Theft Auto, cast in a fierce action role, and The Electric State, cast as the lead motion capture role of Cosmo. Devyn's passion as an artist continues on, and she is always striving to create beautiful stories and share them with the world.
Bone Woman. Unidentified woman discovered May 7th, 1990, in Rogers, Arkansas. There once was a woman who collected pieces of bone, slithered on her stomach across fields and forests, searching. She placed pieces of my life in a bag, so many bones they rattled. She sprawled across the ground, with me, the earth black and seething in the spring damp, shadowing her palms with dirt. Even on the ground, the collector could tell the trajectory of the bullet, one sharp burst through the skull. This is what is called, not head or brain, but skull. A matter of bone. Inside her cave, the woman threaded together what she could. She believed this is how we are not lost, the reunion of bone to bone. This creation, a story as though akin to resolution. But there was not enough, never enough, because beneath this gathering of bone, we are both made to be women of flesh.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.